Tony Blair, welcome to Independent Television. We are delighted to have you with us, and this is for the launch of your book, Tony Blair on Leadership. And I want to start, if I can, by saying you're very frank in this book, and you say, towards the end, I wanted power when I saw what it could do. Take us through. What did you mean by that?
Look, every political career is based, or should be based, on a desire to do something that you believe in as a matter of principle and conviction. But it's also, you're attaining political power. And I think if you're being honest about it, the power itself is also attractive. Now that doesn't mean to say that you should pursue it at the expense of the principle, but of course, because you shouldn't. But I think if you're being honest about it, you also, and you're wanting to exercise leadership, then the exercise of power is part of what goes with it.
What was the moral sense behind wanting to have the power? Because this book is laced with sometimes a religious sense, with about 8 or 10 references to God or the Bible, but it's not a messianic book, it's a practical book.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think that's happened more by accident than deliberately, the references to Moses and so on. Partly because it's also just an interesting concept of leadership, because Moses leads people to the promised land, but actually most of the time people are complaining at him for, why did you bring us out of Egypt? We were better off staying back there in slavery. But it's also because when you're in this position of leadership, you've got to be aware, and it helps to be aware of how leadership is going to be exercised in a way that fulfills a mission or a purpose. Because otherwise you're just occupying an office. You're a placeholder. You're not a leader.
Yeah.
And for me it was very simple. It was about the modernization of Britain and to try and do good in the world. Now whether you achieve that or not is a matter of comment. But that's, I don't think anyone should ever go into politics unless they want to change things.
But all these things often come from a family start. And a key moment for you seemed to be the very early death of your mother. You were 22, your father had a stroke, he had great ambitions to be an MP, to be eloquent, to use all those qualities which you've taken on and enhanced. Was that a key trigger to their bad luck for you to try and compensate?
Yes, I think particularly my father had a stroke when he was 40. He was very young to have a stroke, and he was just about to stand for what was actually a pretty safe Conservative seat in those days in the northeast of England, and he was a barrister, so it was all about the communication. And he was 40, I was 10 years old at the time, and suddenly his entire life trajectory changed, and he had to learn to speak again, which was very difficult.
And what was the emotional impact of that? You can take us through.
I think the emotional impact for me was realizing the fragility of everything, because first of all, our life circumstances changed completely because his main source of income had gone. Now, he was also a lecturer at the Durham University, and he'd been about to give that up in preparation for standing for Parliament in this 1964 election. So our circumstances changed, and then obviously within the family itself, we were then looking after my dad, and my mum was nursing him all through a period of time, about 3 years before he could actually speak again.
Can you remember the emotional difficulty of that? I mean, it's here we are 60 years on.
Yeah.
Does that still
have
that sort of haunting sense to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my mother coming in to me that morning because he'd had a stroke in the middle of when he'd come back from an event late at night, and I could tell immediately something's wrong, in the way that you do as a child. And then she explained that he was in hospital and been seriously ill, and for the first day we thought he'd probably die, but he didn't. So nowadays they treat strokes completely differently and much better. But and 40 is a young age to have a serious stroke.
And did you have a faith at that stage, or did that seem as if God was playing really fearsome tricks with your family?
I remember going into school and saying prayers with one of the masters there. But yeah, no, of course, it gives you a sense that things are fragile. And in a way that what that does, I never spend a lot of time psychoanalyzing myself, but of course, when something like that happens, you realize if I'm going to make something of my life, I better get on with it and work hard.
You had 10 years as Prime Minister, and looking back, you give very straightforward, practical guidance on preparedness. How innocently bad were you at that stage, right at the beginning, just through lack of preparedness experience?
I think the extraordinary thing about politics, which I explain in the book, is in no other walk of life would you give someone a position of that importance, with that much impact over people's lives, with those budgets, and with no experience. I mean, the first job I ever had in government was being Prime Minister. You'd never appoint a CEO of a company that didn't have any executive experience, or the coach of a football team in the Premier League that never coached before. I mean, you just wouldn't do it, and people would regard it as bonkers if you did. But this is the way it happens, obviously, in democracy. And so, yes, the whole book is about the things I wish I'd known when I came in, because it would have shortened the learning curve. I mean, I learned purely by experience. It's best if you can learn by being taught as well as by your experience, because it means you ascend that learning curve that bit faster.
And were the things which you would not have done looking back?
Well, yeah, I mean, quite a lot actually, but...
Go on.
Well, no, I mean, I always say, when people ask me about my regrets, I say that's for me to know and others to find out. But no, I think, for example, I mean, not in respect to particular decisions and so on, but I think in relation to the system, I would be much clearer as to what it was reasonable to expect the system, that's the bureaucracy, to do, and what was not sensible to rely upon them to do. And basically the distinction I make is that, and it's the same in any country, because one of the things, this book is not just based on my 10 years in government as Prime Minister, it's based also on the work we do with 40 odd countries around the world today, and I've been doing now for a long time. So, and it's directed not to the UK leadership particularly, but to leaders in general. And one of the things you find out about a bureaucracy is it responds well at points of crisis, and it can be in a sophisticated system like ours, good at managing things. But if you're relying upon them to change things, you're making the wrong bet.
Now you deal with the 40 countries you deal in your 1,000-strong organization. You deal with people who run democracies as well as people who are just full dictatorial powers. How do we choose? How do we discriminate? It's very simple for me. If you choose only to work in countries that are traditional Western democracies, you're not going to be working in a lot of important places in the world. But for me, it's all about the leadership moving in the right direction or moving in the wrong direction. If they're moving in the wrong direction, I don't want to be part of it. If what they're trying to do is make reforms that are going in the end to make them more open, more successful, their countries and their people better off, then I'll work with them, even though it's a system with which I might have disagreements on particular points. And one of the things is conviction and courage, which you isolate as characteristics which people have got to take in order to be good leadership. And there are a few instances where we learn about you taking steps which we didn't know about. Crime, you talk about as one of the great things which all leaders should try and hopefully eradicate, but anyway, reduce. And suddenly we slip into your inner street and you see someone urinating against a wall and you intervene. What happens?
Yes, I actually remember it. I remember it very well. I mean, I think this must have been in the 1980s. And we were living in a place called Staverdale Road in North London. And I remember going out the street, and actually he was peeing against the door of someone's house. But this was late at night, and I was coming back from the tube. And I sort of confronted him, and then he pulls out a knife So I'm sort of left with this. So do I take him on and maybe end my days because he's peeing against the door? I move on. So I moved on. But, you know, it leaves you with a lingering sense of anger and humiliation, actually. And now I've always been very tough, hardline on crime. And I think it's really, really important. It's the first duty of governments to keep people safe.
And we saw this with the recent riots.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was a swift, fast sense of justice enacted, which eradicated that?
Yeah, no, I did. I thought that was well done.
Yeah. With the sense of time with government, how much one's got in power, were you slow over some things, like 9/11? Did that change your view suddenly when that came in with a worldview on what were the problems?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, 9/11 was, people forget this, but at the time, and for months and months afterwards, it turned the world on its axis.
But you're quite frank, and you say you were slow to realise until that happened.
Yes, because I mean, you had the growth of this sort of movement of terrorism based around perversion of Islam, frankly, but. And there were various events that were happening, but we weren't really joining the dots until 9/11 happened.
Some of the things which you point to for change is the embracing of innovation, of re-engineering government, reinventing the state in a different way. What does that mean?
Well, it means, if you look at the way the state has grown over time, I mean, the 19th century state was a pretty minimal state, certainly at the beginning of the century. The state looked after defense, but not much else. There weren't public systems of health or education. We didn't have a police force in the UK until about the middle of the 19th century. So the state was a minimalist state. And then the Industrial Revolution, because it took with it enormous urbanization, the whole way that people lived and worked and interacted with each other changed. You then grew the state, and in the 20th century, the state became large, and today it's large, right? It's eating up in most countries well over 40% of GDP. Okay. My point is that we've reached the limits of that state. We're going through a technology revolution today, which is going to alter the relationship between the state and the citizen. And there's a whole range of things, services that the state provides, benefits that it pays, that should be done and organized completely differently because technology is going to allow us to do that.
Is that happening?
Well, it's starting to happen. But the big question I ask is, and this is a debate that the country, not just our country, but any developed, in fact, any country should have, is, am I right when I say this is the 21st century equivalent of the Industrial Revolution? If you take the Industrial Revolution, you'd have to say, by the end of the 19th century, life, never mind, individual bits of the country and bits of economic production, life was completely different, right? And it, by the way, it gave rise to our political parties today. I mean, our political parties are still based on left-right distinctions around state and market and private enterprise and so on. And what I'm saying is, this technology revolution is as important as the 19th century Industrial Revolution. And so it's going to change everything. So the big question, we should debate this, is if that's true, how do we access its opportunities and mitigate its risks? Because it's general purpose technology. So it's got as many downsides as it has upsides. And this is the big task for public policy. And for Britain particularly, we've got a strong position in artificial intelligence. We're probably after America and China, number 3 in the world. Well, how do we keep that and how do we grow it? How do we make sure in life sciences, for example, we're one of the, if not the best country in the world, because we've got the possibility of doing that. But it's frustrating to me that public debate doesn't really debate this question.
So there could not be a better opportunity for this. You must be very pleased we have a Labour government in. And what do you think they have got to do now? Not a commentary on the government, but just your view on where we need to go as a country.
Put this at the centre. the whole mission for the government, because the growth and other missions that the government's setting out, all of these will be affected by technology. Even law and order, by the way, will be transformed by technology. Defense is transformed by technology today. If you look at the way the Ukraine war is being fought, the lessons of change in military capability and military operation are vast.
All this I get is a strategic thought and a plan and a priority. What comes across in the book is also its interaction with people. I mean, that's for me to be the key message. And you describe there are two sorts of brain. Tell us about that and what your brain is like. Which side of it is?
Well, most of the people engaged in technology have got what I would call the sort of science brain. I mean, they're engineers, most of these people. And, when people call them geeks, it's really because they've got that, they're right in the zone of that.
Not you.
Not me. No, I'm on the more of the art side. And I think I say in the book, when my physics teacher was actually in awe of how bad my physics paper was.
You failed?
I failed miserably. And I've always found, one of the things I do now is try and read more about science to try and understand it. But I know in my own brain I have difficulty understanding scientific.
And your son had a slightly different view on your ability to take in some of the technology.
My oldest, when I asked my oldest son for advice on what to say to a cryptocurrency conference, he said to me, just tell them you're sick, because you're not fit for prime time on this subject.
Good decision.
But I did address them actually, unfortunately. But
making difficult decisions is a key part of leadership, and we've seen in recent years Rishi struggle, Boris often not able to make a decision with any coherence, and Liz Truss oblivious to it. Where do you, when you look back on the 14 years of the Tories, do you see crucial leadership errors?
The best way to describe it maybe is to say, one point in the book, I say the right relationship between politics and policy is policy first and politics second. And what I mean by that is, you first of all work out the right answer. I mean, if you look at any of the leaders that have changed,
I get the theory. But I want to come on to just the literally, because the person who actually is in the chair of power matters. What happened in the last 14 years with the leaders?
We basically had politics first and policy second. So you work out what's our political, what do we want to say politically, and then you construct a policy around it. And what you end up with doing, if you do that, is first of all you end up changing the right order of things. You end up chasing after shifts in public opinion and responding to them rather than leading them. And you end up with short-term decisions that have no long-term coherence.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, and I think that is what happened.
And what was the damage?
Well, I think the damage in the end, the government, the best description of the damage is when Keir became Prime Minister in July, he was the 6th Prime Minister in 8 years since the Brexit referendum. And you can't run a country like that. You can't succeed like that. How can you? When I ended my time in 2007, I was the 3rd Prime Minister in almost 30. And there had been a lot of continuity of policy. The other thing that I think is really important is it takes a long time to change a country. And we had, I had a difficult decision to make about the degree to which I was going to undercut the Thatcher and John Major inheritance. And I decided that in terms of the economy, in terms of things like, the reduction in the top rate of tax, the privatization of industries, the trade unions being put within a framework, I was going to leave that undisturbed because I thought it was right for the economy. But we would rebuild the public realm and modernize the country around, things like the minimum wage, gay rights, devolving power, Mayor of London, and so on. So we had the country ended up with pretty much almost 30 years of quite coherent policy towards business, which is one of the reasons why, investment was strong. And on the day I left office, I think we were $2 to the pound. In the subsequent years, we've zigzagged.
You have 3 rules which you take out as priorities from your leadership and your continuing leadership of your institution. Being a strong American ally, being influential in Europe, and having international development as soft power for the UK. With the recent embargo on arms, and we've seen Canada much more severe than us, do you think you're an expert? You put yourself at the center of the Middle East to try to find a solution. How helpful is that?
Well, you know, I always say to people, like, I'm not going to give a kind of running commentary on what they're doing. So I don't want to get into individual decisions they've made, because that's for them to make. What I would say is that this American relationship remains, to me, absolutely critical. Now, I know a lot of people didn't like the decisions I took post 9/11 in respect of Afghanistan, or particularly in respect of Iraq. But I felt it was always important that we stayed as the closest American ally, and I still believe that's true. Secondly, obviously in Europe, I think we're going to have to repair that relationship now, but at the moment we've lost it. And international development, you know, Britain, I mean, the Department of International Development was I think it was the best soft power arm in the world at the time in its heyday. And we've dismantled a lot of it. So again, you know, there's a big rebuilding job to do if you want to exercise power, and you've got to stay close to your allies.
One of the things which you tell your children is about how to avoid potential failure by a priority in your life. Tell us about that, what you tell them.
Well, the personal equivalent of policy first, politics second, I used to say to my children is, you know, work hard, play hard. Work hard, play hard, you've got a chance of success. Play hard, work hard, no, you're probably going to fail. Because if play hard comes first, the work hard. What
was their reaction when you were telling them that?
Like most of what I told them, they would ignore it completely. But I think it's true, by the way.
So leadership within a family. Now, we're in a world of gender equality. What happens in the leadership within a family? You've got a very impressive, legal-minded wife. Who's the leader?
Oh, that's definitely a joint leadership, at best. It's things change. I mean, funny enough, with the book, I mean, some people have said to me, it's interesting from a parent's point of view, and I guess some of the things are the same. But no, I think if the partnership in a personal sense is to work, it's got to be one of equals today.
But part of the benefits of great leadership is continuing relationships with people who one works with, but also in one's personal life. You've had a very long, enduring, devoted marriage. What is the secret of that with trying to lead people to have that combination?
I don't know, because I honestly don't know the answer to that. And the one thing I never do is to preach to people about personal lives. And you know, I'm lucky with what I have. And I think the most important thing actually is, in any relationship, is that you respect the other person. Ultimately, you've got to that respect's got to be maintained.
I remember a particular intriguing incident where I saw Cherie show her influence. You and I were meeting Mikhail Gorbachev, and the conversation was looking at the political geo-landscape, and suddenly she interrupted and she said, "Gentlemen, none of you have mentioned anything to do with women." And she stopped us all.
That sounds right.
In the book, there isn't much mention of women. Is that just because you're assuming it's a equal leadership, or?
Yeah, I guess, but you've reminded me, so you're going to get me into trouble now at home. No, look, I think we ended up with more women MPs than ever before, and I think more women in the cabinet, and the first time we had a female chief whip, female foreign secretary. I mean, and my institute today, by the way, there's, I think, a majority of women working for the institute and in senior leadership positions. So I think the best thing is not to talk about it, but to do it.
How have you seen it change in the last, 40 years since?
I think there is a big change. it's still got some way to go. And I find, it's interesting with the Institute because it does have women in many of the senior positions, and I find working with women, it tends to be more collegiate. I think with men, I think ego is always a bigger factor.
You're very good about saying how you don't bear grudges and you see the goal rather than the human difficulties as your priority. With someone like Donald Trump, who is as unpredictable, and I want to come on to Putin in a minute, what will be your terms of engagement with him, and what would it mean for Britain, do you think, if we had someone of that ilk?
Look, you don't get to choose another country's leader. So the important thing is to work with them and find the points of agreement and find the areas where you can work with them. And actually, I worked with the Trump administration and actually met Donald Trump in the context of the Abraham Accords between the UAE and Israel that I was working on, where we were working on the same path. And I think the most important thing for a British Prime Minister is you can't, when you're leading a country, you're not an NGO, and frankly, you're not a journalist, right? You're the leader, and you've got to engage with them in a position of leadership. And there are always things you can find, and you always should find if you're a British Prime Minister dealing with an American president, where you can work together.
One of the most surprising things in the book is when I think of Berlusconi with his bunga parties and his flamboyance and his billions. What did you gain from him for Britain?
Well, it's something pretty big, actually, which is that he gave us the votes for the Olympic bid, which got us across the line in front of France. So we wouldn't have had the 2012 Olympics in the UK unless Italy had backed us, because I think the votes were very narrow in the end, and they were originally pledged to France.
So how did that happen? Because your politics and his are markedly different.
Yeah, they are. But I went to see him. I mean, there's always this line in the media that I went on holiday with Silvio. I didn't go on holiday. I went to see him when I was on holiday in Italy. I went to see him in his place in Sardinia, and I had a relationship with him because I'd always found him very straight to deal with, and I always say to people, after a time in politics, you speak as you find. You don't speak as other people tell you should speak, So, and he said to me, because we were, I always treated him with respect, and some people were frankly always, because of all the bunga stuff and everything, didn't want to be seen with him. And he said to me, how much does it matter to you? And I said, it really matters to me. I really want to win this bid for Britain. So he said, okay, we'll switch the votes.
And that was literally the factor which made it happen.
Yeah, and he did. And that was the thing that I always say to people, look, there's no point, because some people say to me, can you mix with these people and got on with these people? And I say, look, I'm just speaking as I find. I asked him for something. He said he would deliver, and he delivered. So I was pretty happy with that.
Immigration, probably the greatest issue which is dealing across the world. And you have not the solution, but a potential way to try and mitigate that. And that is digital identification cards. Is that going to solve it?
It won't solve it, but it'll massively improve it. And it will solve one very, very important aspect. Because obviously there's lots of debates about boat people and Calais and so on. But what we've got to understand is that any country, including ours, the biggest problem you have are large numbers of people, hundreds of thousands of people who are in our country or in any of modern Western country without permission to be here. They can come in, because you can come in 1,000 different ways.
But does that solve it? Because then you have courts which do or don't let them be sent back.
Well, your sending back is another dimension, and that's why I say it doesn't solve all your problems, but it solves one problem, which is who's got a right to be here, and you can at least put people into a system where you may be able to return them.
And privacy, you go, doesn't matter?
Well, privacy does matter, but the amount of information that a government would require for you to have your own digital identifier, which in the end is something you should own and will allow you to access government services and to conduct your private affairs. I think a younger generation of people is completely comfortable with this. And by the way, your local supermarket and Amazon, Netflix, you think of the amount of information they've got on you, which is probably as sensitive as anything the government will have.
So what did Brexit do for immigration?
Well, what we did, which is absolutely extraordinary, is we ended up stopping a whole lot of young, often single Europeans coming and working here in the hospitality sector. Now we've swapped out what were younger, usually single people coming in from Europe to work in our hospitality sector and other sectors, technology sector, and we swapped that for much increased immigration from Asia and Africa.
So did Brexit increase immigration and not bring back control to the borders as was famously promised?
Well, that's been the result. I mean, I understand it wasn't the intention, but the result is we have higher levels of immigration and high levels of people bringing dependents into the country. We just need to think how we repair the relationship. And then in time, we've got to think as a country of where do we fit in the world? I mean, one of the things that gives a country energy and appetite for facing all the challenges is if they know where they fit. And I constantly say to people, and I say it in the book, by the middle of this century, you're going to have 3 superpowers that are each one of them more powerful than any of the other countries by a long way. You're going to have America, you're going to have China, and you're going to have India, probably India. All other countries are going to be small in comparison to any of these 3. So if you're Germany or Italy or France or the UK, or you're Indonesia or the Philippines.
So we're weakened.
Yeah, there's no doubt we've weakened ourselves. We've just got to repair it.
And by repairing it, does that mean having youth mobility? These are early steps?
Personally, I think youth mobility within Europe would be a good thing for us, but the government's got to take a view on that. And it's clear that this government's going to be much more open to working with Europe, but you've got to take this step by step. And people, I don't think, want to go back and revisit the whole Brexit issue again. Certainly not in this time. Maybe in later times they do, but who knows?
I said I'd come back to Putin, and you've met Putin, you've eyeballed him, you've been in meetings with him, you negotiated with him, and you talk about how democracy will only work if it has an efficacy, if it provides a solution, and that dictatorships unravel. Was Ukraine the tipping point for Putin to show an unraveling of no one around him to stop him from damaging not only his country, but the rest of the world?
It was an example of the dangers of dictatorship. I mean, there are regimes that aren't democracies, but where there is still a collegiate sense of working and where leaders will still be open to challenge. The people around them aren't frightened of saying, look, I don't think this is going to work. We should think.
Is that gone?
With Putin, I think it did go. I think he became very isolated.
So how
I mean, you didn't need a huge piece of intelligence work done by the Russian intelligence service to work out the Ukrainians were not going to accept this. You could just have gone to Ukraine and spoken to some people.
So was he a fool? What happened?
Well, he believed that he could topple the government easily, and I think he misunderstood the lesson of Crimea.
Is this delusion?
Well, he did delude himself that he could do it easily because we're now into the 3rd year of the war. But it's still the one thing, though, that Putin also thinks, because this is what he believes as a result of what's happened with the West, is he thinks that he can always outlast the West, that the West lacks staying power. And one of the really important things the West has got to do is to provide evidence, and Ukraine is the test, that it's got staying power.
Do you think there is a hope that there will be a solution for this terrible conflict? And hope is one of the themes which goes through your book. Yes,
because I think in the end, everyone understands there's not going to be an end to this conflict that's similar to the end of the First World War or the Second World War. There will, in the end, be some form of agreement. And the important thing is that we strengthen Ukraine so that when that moment comes, when he realizes he's not going to achieve his aim, that the Ukrainians can get a decent and a sensible deal.
Do you feel, you've got a huge experience of world politics, that we're at a point of maximum anxiety?
Yes, I mean,
Explain.
I think
where you
so,
are.
but I'm not entirely sure about it. But I'm struck by the number of people whose views I respect, who say we are almost in a pre-war period. I find it hard to believe that China, because if we ever end up with a major global conflict, it will almost certainly be as a result of the American-Chinese relationship deteriorating. I find it hard to believe that either America or China wants such a conflict. China's got such a massive interest in stability. But the fact is, what Ukraine did is it disturbed the conventional wisdom and changed the conventional wisdom that big power conflict was over. And if you'd said to me in January 2022, do you think it's likely that Russia would try and topple the regime in Ukraine by military action? I would have said no. I don't think.
I'm reading that. You're listening to people. You take views very seriously. You are anxious.
No, I am anxious. I think you've got to be anxious because there is you can see how if the world splits into these camps at a certain point, you can see how there could be conflict, and you've got flashpoints like Taiwan and obviously what Putin's doing in Europe that could potentially lead to this. It's just that I still instinctively feel that the consequences of such a conflict would be so devastating, people won't do it. But I do think you've got to prepare for all eventualities. That's why I always say to people about China, because I'm completely opposed to disengaging from China. I think you've got to be strong enough to deal with whatever comes out of China, but stay engaged.
One of your last chapters is about legacy and protection of legacy. This book is part of putting out the stall of what you've believed and what you've achieved. How important is it to protect your legacy?
Well, I've got a chapter in the book that's about protecting your legacy, and I also admit that I've not been very good at protecting it. But in the end, I think you can do a certain amount to do it, and it helps, frankly, if you're able to build a body of adherents and constituency that is going to support you in it. But ultimately, you can't really decide it.
And Iraq, is that ever going to become something which history will see as a positive, or do you think that is going to be?
I mean,
you went from
history's a long time in the making, and look, there may be different perspectives in time that come about on it. I mean, I think that the most important thing for me at this juncture is just people to understand it's not all we did, because sometimes it suits people both on the far right and on the far left to say it is.
If you had one message to leaders around the world, what they should be concentrating on now, and what are the key issues which they should be engaging with?
Well, I suppose I'd say that's why I wrote the book, so you can go and see it. But I think
I mean specific arenas.
I think the most specific thing, if you're in government today, is to work out what this technology revolution can do for you, and to acquire the skills within government, because they'll come from the outside, not the inside, to be able to do that well. And I think for developed countries, it offers us a solution to this problem of either you end up with rising spending, rising tax, poor outcomes, or you're cutting back the whole time.
But it's the centre which defines you, and you've described Thatcher. You've described the Conservatives have taken on a perversion of Thatcherism in the last few years, and a Euro scepticism which became extreme. And is it again what's your hope for the present government that they're going to do? I
think the most important thing I continue to think is you win from the centre, and you should govern from the centre, not because it's splitting the difference between right and left, but because you're putting solutions first, and you're putting the policy first and the politics second.
Final question, is democracy safer or more at risk at this moment in time?
I think democracy is deeply challenged at this moment in time, but I still think it will ultimately prevail.